Tonight, the city of Lagos
there is still a poor level of
Be the first to know. From the north, south, east, west, and around Africa, we break the news.
One Nigeria.
Now you can catch all the actions live as the news breaks. We are Core TV News.
Welcome to Core
Our
TV
24-hour news station.
Life, they say, is spent in the currency of time, so there is no such thing as African time. There are only Africans who do not have or know the value for time. Now, if you understand with me that everything we do and everything we say is a function of that limited resource called time, so it doesn't matter whether you have a lot to do or you have little to do. It doesn't matter if you've started working on your resolution or your dreams in the early hours of 2014. Time wouldn't wait for you. And so we apologize for coming a bit late on the show this morning. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. Talking about time, I was in a wedding on Saturday. And for the first time in my wedding experiences, that wedding ended. Both the service and the reception ended a few minutes to 2 o'clock. Now the bride, is it the bride now? No, the bridegroom called me afterwards and said, do you know that 65 people, we're still counting, have called me and said they got there after the wedding ended. You know, and I was so excited that for the first time now, we're going to have people who are also going to be time conscious, not only at work, but also for functions like weddings. So if you are thinking that that wedding you want to attend later this weekend will start around 3, you are better think otherwise. Now, time is also counting for politicians. In a few months away from now, it's going to be 2015, and the general elections will be here again. Now, it will be another 4 years for people to evaluate what politicians have done for them, if indeed they have met their promises with great action in the area of infrastructural development. On the show this Tuesday, we're looking at neglected infrastructures ahead 2015 elections. Now, we did a couple of reports earlier last week thereabout on some bad roads within Lagos and outside. Of course, I'm going to start with this one. There's a Riverview estate in Ogun State, I believe in what they call E4, am I right? Local government in Ogun State. Now, another exciting thing about this local government is also what we've described as the very lackadaisical attitude to what is called the value for life. As we speak now, right in front of Fagbim's filling station, just before Bega, after the Long Bridge, there is a corpse there that has been there since Salah celebration. And we've been crying out, yelling on this show that please, relevant authorities, security agencies, especially the E4 local government in Ogun State, should take responsibility for that. I mean, if somebody can die on the road and then nothing in a state, in a nation, in a local government that has political leadership, then what are we saying about the value for life? And in our interview with residents in that area, they say that even the Long Bridge, before this particular Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, there are quite a number of cases like that. People that die there are just left there to rot. And then many have even gone to say that if you check that Long Bridge, you will see bones of some dead people there. We hope that government will rise up to that responsibility. We'll kickstart with this report of a Riverview estate in E4 local government and what the infrastructures are like as we speak. Join us again.
The rise in population in Nigeria has resulted in pressure for the provision of basic social amenities. Naturally, it is expected of the government to provide such needs like housing, roads, among others, for the people. In this part of the world, housing is majorly a private affair, and in the case of the residents of Isheri North, Ifor local government area of Ogun State, housing has been solely a private affair. But government seem to be lagging in other infrastructural duties. This looks beautiful, the Riverview estate, but the roads passing through this multi-million naira estate and others in the vicinity is better imagined than experienced. Although the roads from the estate leading all the way to the Isheri market was started during the Gbenga Daniel administration, The whole area, according to residents, has not experienced government presence since change in governance, as several efforts, according to them, to reach relevant authorities have proven abortive. They claim that the community service put in place to address the issue, although expensive, has brought little results.
Oh, well, I'm one of the pioneer residents of this place. So this estate started 2006. So it's hell. You can see the cars. It's as if you've gone to swim in the mud. Well, it's not just the road. Everything you've seen here is the effort of the residents. Electricity, the road, even this year, we filled everything here. And brought in bulldozer, brought in grader, brought in compressor, and but this is the issue. So we've written to government, as we know that Gbenga Daniel's regime started this place. So, and when we observed the quality of work they were doing, then in 2007 we wrote him and I said, look, this place is going to be a mess because of the quality of job, and since that time they just abandoned us. And when the new government came, we've written them, they've not acknowledged our...
But why will anybody acquire land in such a challenging environment as the Sherry North? Abayomi Akinde, who is the chairman, Landlord Association, was quick to defend the residents.
There is nobody who, will put his investment, his money, in a risky place. If we knew that there is a problem here, nobody would have invested here. This estate was sold to us, the land here was sold to us by the government of Ogun State. All of us got our certificate of occupancy. So if anybody is to be blamed, if there is any problem, I think the problem lies squarely on the shoulder of the government of Ogun State. Because we didn't go out of our way to, to buy land from these speculators or moneyless. We bought from the government. Government sold this land to us. We paid development levies to the government of Ogun State. They sold the land to us, gave us approved building plan without even advising the residents that, look, this is the specification, you must raise your building to this particular height because there is a problem in this topography. They didn't do that. Any plan you submit to the Ministry of Physical Planning, provided you pay them, they are going to approve. Yes, development levy varies from house to house or from plot to plot, depending on the size of your plot. But the minimum development levy here is 1.2 million.
There is an allegation that the government has distanced itself because it claims the area is water-plagued, whereas the government has also proposed an estate just opposite the Riverview estate. Core TV News went on a trip to Abeokuta to get government's response after several calls and messages sent got no response from all quarters. Core TV News, however, gathered that both the Commissioner and Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Works, were not on seat. The roads have not only been abandoned, the ones leading to the Sherry Market have become workshops and parking lots for heavy-duty vehicles and faulty cars. Could this be a crisis of difference in the blueprints of different administrations? If the Amosu administration is not identifying with the former projects, despite its promise to rebuild, does this also mean these residents have not been responsible to the government in their taxes?
Yes, like all this receipt that I have in my hand is the receipt that we used to pay trade permit and the local government trade fees every year. And also the tax, Ogun State tax revenues.
Another election year is fast approaching. New campaigns, new promises. But the people of Sherry North are asking, where are the dividends of the past years? Ebolomo Adekunle, Core TV News, Ogun.
Thanks for staying with us. We're going to open the phone lines for you in the GV to find out if you have such neglected infrastructures in your own community, what you've done thus far, and what the response has been from the instituted authority. I'm joined now in our studios live by Achike Chud. Good morning, and thank you for finding time to join us.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning.
You saw the report earlier, and there's always been this gap between the governed and, of course, the leadership. What do you think is responsible for infrastructural decay as it is now in most parts, especially rural parts of Nigeria, even as we speak of abundant human and natural resources in Nigeria?
It's a misgovernance and maladministration. It has to be, because that essentially is what government and governance is all about, addressing the needs of the people. And the needs of the people go beyond even providing an economic template, through various economic policies and so on for, development of the society generally, growth, industrialization and the rest, which would have, positive consequences or impact on the lives of the people. But it's also about developing infrastructure, because the basis of, well-being or proper existence, in the society is also, based on the kind of infrastructure, physical and social infrastructure that you put on ground for the people, and of course the political infrastructure. You're not talking about institutions and so on that are supposed to actually be in charge of this issue of infrastructure. So I said misgovernance, and then of course you also know that when we talk about misgovernance, you're also talking about governments that have not been accountable to the people, governments that have not been transparent in their dealings with the people. And so when you have such a government, the tendency is that corruption that has been on the upswing for a very long time continues unabated. And what does corruption do? Corruption takes away, especially if you're talking about corruption in the larger society, it takes away, from your ability to put something down, for the people. It takes away from your ability to provide certain essential services and infrastructure for the people. And instead of putting these monies, these resources, into developing the society, it ends up in the hands of very, very few people. In most cases, they are kept outside of this country to create, jobs and, employment opportunities, and to develop other economies other than your own economy. So there is no way you will talk about the deficit in infrastructure in this country without talking about, not having proper governments at all levels that should provide this. Like you said, there's so much resources in this country. The country is blessed with human resources and natural resources. Yes, they have not been able to get at the natural resources really, to tap into it fully, to exploit and exploit it fully on behalf of the people. They have always, and that's why people will argue that Nigeria continues to be a renter state, where majority of the money, of the revenues that, this country derives is from the oil sector. In those days, many years back, we had the agricultural sector, in fact, at a time superseding what oil is doing in Nigeria. At a time, 70-75% of the revenues for this country came from the agricultural sector. Then those were the golden years of Nigeria's agriculture. The granite pyramids that we saw when we were growing up in history books and geography books and so on. The cocoa industry in the West, that also played a role in sustaining economic development in the West. And then the palm produce, from the southeast of this country, southeast, south, and so on. So all of them were also playing their own part, in national economic sustenance and national economic growth and the rest. But over time, governments became lazy. Those in charge of this country became lazy, and corruption set in. And that's why people have made this argument, whether to look at oil, which they call the black gold, whether it is a curse or a blessing. To a very large extent, the fact that, other countries have also have large resources, so much revenue coming in from the industrial oil sector, and they have been able to develop their countries. They've been able to do so much, in those countries. Tells you that resources in themselves are not a cost to any nation, but it is the way some of these resources are being, used up for personal interest that gives one the impression that perhaps it is a cost. Because when a country is blessed so abundantly, you can't be talking about a country that is lacking in the ability to put resources on ground for the people.
The challenge oftentimes is not really infrastructural development, because at times many people complain about bad roads and poor infrastructure, which at some times were developed, were actually constructed. For instance, bad roads. You know, you see a governor comes and opens a dualization, you know, the local government chairman comes and does something. Who do you think is responsible for the maintenance? Because that has been a major issue, especially in infrastructures in this part of the world.
Well, the same governments, federal level, state level, local government level. Because if you're talking about road infrastructure, there are some roads that are federal roads. They are the duty and responsibility, obligations of the federal government to maintain properties that belong to them on behalf of the people. That's why you have budgets. That's why you have ministries created for specific purposes. You have the Ministry of Works and the Environment and the rest. And so it is their duty, it is their responsibility, whether it is at the federal level or state level and so on, to ensure that, you know, resources that are located to those ministries and so on are used to do the work that they are supposed to, they are located for in the first place. You know, roads infrastructure, for instance. If you remember, in those days, we used to have the toll gates all over the country. Once you are moving from one boundary, state boundary to another state boundary, you have a toll gate. If you're moving beyond that boundary to another state and so on, you have another toll gate. Now, the reasons those toll gates were set up in the first place or put up in the first place was so that tolls realized from there could be used to maintain the roads on which they are found. But you know that over time again, we talk about the monster of corruption and so on. The money is collected from these toll gates ended up in the wrong hands, in the private pockets of government functionaries, powerful people in government and the rest, and nothing ever was done. And so what happened was a kind of 419, because when you obtain something under false pretense, that, you know, it falls under 419. And so government was obtaining money from the people under false pretense, you know, and never did anything about the road for which they were taxing people. And so this has been the issue. And if you talk of infrastructural deficits, it's in virtually every aspect of our political economy. At the medical level, the level of health, you know, or healthcare infrastructure, it is non-existent in virtually all the states of this country. And that's why our big men continue to leave this country. When they have issues, they or their family members have issues and so on, they go to take treatment in the best hospitals in the world using our own money. And same thing with housing. In fact, we are told that there's a housing deficit of about 21 million, 22 million. And that so much money is needed to be spent every single year. You know, I think the CBN some 3-4 years ago also said something about that about 3 to 4 trillion naira is needed every year for the next 15 years for them to be able to close the gap in housing, you know, in this country. Then you talk about educational infrastructure. Of course, we are all aware of the ASO strike that lasted for almost 6 months and so on. It was all about the decay, the infrastructural decay in the educational institutions in this country, you know, and so many. Are you going to the police stations? Are you going to virtually every aspect of our life?
Can the citizenry be totally absolved from this challenge of what they call the poor maintenance culture, from throwing, you know, liquids, throwing containers recklessly into drainage facilities and all of that? What role do you think the Nigerian people can play in maintaining these infrastructures when they're
well, the thing is that there is no doubt that they have a role to play. Sometimes you find out that they are the ones, you know, sabotaging some of these efforts, you know, of government. For instance, the issue of electricity, for instance, you have instances where cables and the electrical components are stolen for personal, you know, benefit by, you know, certain members of the community. In fact, sometimes some of these will come from the same community that are supposed to be benefiting from this infrastructure. We are also told that some of the communication network providers are also not exempt in terms of, you know, the harm that is done to their facilities. When they are located, especially in remote areas and so on, generators and the rest get stolen. Cables get stolen and so on, and they have to be replaced at a cost. So this has a general, you know, negative impact on the people, because the more, you know, it costs you to do your business, the tendency for you to close down that business completely, leading to job loss or to increase the cost, you know, and you know, or task the people, the consumers of these products at the end of the day, and that takes away money for that people would have used for other, aspects of, their lives and so on. So these are some of the implications, their economic implications. So I agree that the people have a role to play. They have a role to play to monitor some of these infrastructures, especially those ones that we have seen over time, get stolen, and then government now has to replace them and so on. They have that. Then again, there has to be a right kind of culture, a culture of discipline, a culture of knowing that you also have something to gain or to lose if this thing works or if it does not work. You understand? And so you're expected to also play your role. Like you just talked about people who, contribute to environmental degradation. They throw things out of the windows of their cars and so many other things. They fail to properly dispose of their waste and so on, not realizing that there's a connection between their state of well-being, and what they do, with refuse and some of these things that they discard. Because ultimately it could come back to harm the society if you don't dispose of some of these things properly and the rest. I agree. But again, you see, over time, what has happened is that there has been a disconnect between the people and government. And so if, for instance, you expect a policeman to be above board in his conduct with the public, in his interactions with the public and so on, he doesn't really see why he should be. There's no motivation because he knows that perhaps probably his commissioner or his DPO or the inspector general of police or the president of the country or the minister of police affairs or whoever, those people who have a greater burden of responsibility are the ones undermining the very institutions on which they are sitting on. So if these people are taking care of themselves, illegally or illegitimately, why would he, the ordinary policeman, not help himself? You understand why he finds himself in the field. So these are some of the issues. So there is no connection between the people and aspects of the governance that they go through. So these are some of the things that some of the challenges that confront the people on a day-to-day basis. People do not really see any reason to be committed, do not see any reason to be patriotic, do not see any reason to be law-abiding. After all, the very people in their own estimation who make the laws are the very people who undermine the laws. There's a saying that think not what your nation will do for you, but otherwise what you can do to promote your country. For instance, the report we showed earlier in E4 local government, you see landlords who came up to say, we're not even asking for free infrastructure. We have contributed close to 5 million naira to, support collaboration with the state government, but still nothing is coming from that point. And there are also issues of continuity in projects from one administration to the other. One governor comes up who happens to be of a different party, and the moment he leaves, the projects is started, the estates viewed, the other new party does not want to continue. How do you think that can be checked in this climate? Yeah, the thing is that just like the people of IFO, embarking on self-help projects and so on, it's all over the country now. People are no longer waiting for government or looking up to government to do certain basic things and so on. They try to, if the roads are bad, they try to grade, they try to contribute money to do some of these things. These are usually the responsibilities of government and so on. I also know about a community at Magboro, same Ogun State, that has also done the same thing. Over maybe 2 or 1 kilometer or so, they have off-road, road network. They've been able to erect NEPA poles and the rest, and then with the other requisite infrastructure. And so they've been able to do that for themselves. Because I think there is this disillusionment and this belief or feeling that the government is not there for the people. So if they can provide their own some level of governance within their own community and not look up to the government, fine. If the government decides to now come in later, it becomes a bonus. But again, even when you make reference to this quote, that you talked about by John F. Kennedy, I think he made that statement within a context. Already you had a government in America. You had a government that was working essentially for the American people and so on. And you had an economy that was doing fairly well in terms of, and of course, per capita income was much higher than maybe what you have here today and the rest. And you had, a social condition that was more or less more livable than what you have here today. So when a country has done so much for you, and he makes that statement, it must be taken in that context. It is not when a people feel deprived, when a people feel that there is no basis for even considering themselves as free citizens of their own nation, and then you ask them to make sacrifices, you ask them to not ask what the government should do for them, their country should do, but what they should do for their country. It doesn't play out that way at all. Like I said, when JFK made that statement, it was made in a context that the people already had a country that they were proud of, that the people already had a country that was essentially or relatively working. We do not have the same kind of scenario. So for people to use that kind of expression, I think amounts to sheer blackmail in this country. We know when the Shagari administration kept on telling Nigerians to tighten their belts and so on. The Babangida administration, when he introduced SAP, the same thing, you need to make sacrifices, you need to tighten your belt and the rest. And this belt tightening has continued for more than 3 decades now in this country. There has not been any meaningful change, any meaningful impact in the lives of the ordinary people. So the ordinary Nigerian has grown absolutely disenchanted and disillusioned with governance and with his political, leadership. And so if you talk about the state of infrastructure, you're asking yourself what is going to happen now between now and 2015, when the election is going to take place, next year, general election. And you do that because you're worried that the politicians are beginning to abandon their primary responsibility, all in the name of getting back to office. And I also, admire the fact that this station, this media organization, wants to keep the politicians on their toes. It's an acknowledgement that, yes, we know that you're having an election, but you also, for as long as you remain in power, you also have a continuous duty, to provide certain infrastructure to make the lives of the people better, And that's why you said government is a continuity, it's a continuum. That, and what happens, with assets and liabilities, that a government inherits assets when it comes into power, and also liabilities. The liabilities could come in the form of infrastructure, for instance. Gigantic infrastructure that the previous government has spent so much money, the people's money, to build. Now a government comes into place, and those things no longer matter. It doesn't matter whether 5 billion naira has been spent in that project. And it is your duty that that project must see the light of day, so that the money that has been put into it will be justified at the end of the day. But just like you said, and that's the unfortunate thing, that these people come in, they want their own thing, they want their own projects, and so on and so forth. And so by the time they themselves are also leaving, and another person is taking over from them, they also abandon those other projects. But who loses at the end of the day? It is the country, it is the state, it is the people that lose. And again, it just tells you the kind of people these politicians are.
What exactly do you think can be done to ensure that this does not continue to be a norm in the country?
If you ask me that, you're also asking me another question. And the other question you're asking me is, what do we do to ensure that we have proper government and proper governance? Because like I said, this decay in infrastructure, this deficit in infrastructure is a consequence of misgovernance or lack of governance that we have in this country. So you cannot, see, and that's what I tell people everywhere I go. We can discuss sectoral issues. This is a sectoral issue. It's about state of infrastructure. We can discuss educational, the problem in the education sector. We can discuss the problem in the health sector. We can discuss the criminal justice, the problem in the criminal justice system and the rest. We can discuss all of these things and so on. These are sectoral issues. Now, if you tackle these problems one by one, the reasons that led to the decay in the first place would eventually come back again to haunt that particular sector. That is what is going to happen until you have a holistic, approach to the issue of governance in Nigeria. And I think that can only be resolved at the political level. It's a political question. And I think that it is more important for us to ask political questions and not economic questions. You could talk about trying to improve the economy, talk about trying to improve this, but if you do not improve our ability to govern properly, because the economy is also, dependent on good governance, and that's why they talk about, in a proper country where you should have, a proper country, where you have, standards, certain standards, that are of international repute. You talk about, you know, transparency in governance, accountability in governance, the rule of law in governance, and so on and so forth. All of these things are hinged, you know, on the on the issue of governance, and that also plays out at the political level of this country. So the people, I think, what the people are expected is to have a hands-on role, you know, within the political development of this country. Yeah.
Our correspondent Oluwaseyi Adegoke was also at Ijagemo, that's an Igba local government in Lagos, and this is also another community that is about to be cut off from the rest of the world as a result of poor infrastructure in the name of bad road. We're going to bring you that report now, and shortly after that, the phone lines will be open for you as we intend to have your view and, of course, your own experience in your community. Stick around.
The scene is better imagined as belonging to a village in a remote area, but surprisingly, this is a Ijagemo community in Iba, local council development area of Lagos State. Call TV News crew could not drive down to the area due to the condition of the road. The residents say the road has been a major hindrance in their day-to-day activities.
I don't know the actual adjective I can use to qualify this road. This road has been an hindrance to our progress in this vicinity. I don't know what to say than to beg Lagos State government to come to our aid. We are really suffering here. The sufferness is immeasurable.
We have attracted the attention of the authorities. Some of the time they visited here, some by the means of communication. They have seen our plight, but they keep promising us day in, day out. Now, the schools here, the attendance is no longer controlled by school calendar. It's controlled by the season. What I mean is that children cannot go to school during the rainy season.
We are suffering in this country too, in this Ijagemo, very much. We cannot able to go out to go and buy something, even though we are even selling market. It's not easy for us to go and buy our market due to something that they are selling 50 naira outside. Due to our environment, we are buying it 150.
As it is, we have about 30,000 residents in this area that are above 18 years. And the government is expecting them to come out and vote. How would they vote? We are paying for different kinds of levies, land use charge and all that. So we are still appealing to them. There is nothing we can do on our own. This problem is too much. They should please come to our aid.
The high chair of the community, Adio Ajakaye, says the community is cut off from other parts of the state.
Ibi ina lawa tona afi aba ase oṣù yẹn ti lé nsin ti pé àti lé ó ti lé lóṣù kan sin tá rí wọn oṣù ó ti poṣù méjì báyìí àdéhùn expect wọn pé kí wọ́n wá bóyá wọ́n ti gbàgbé wa ni election dem ń bọ̀ lọ́nà torí gbogbo àwọn èèyàn wa tá a bá sọ fún kán lè bá at least kò easy kí ibẹ̀ la dẹ̀ ti ń dìbò ẹ sọ fún mi ẹni tó fẹ́ lọ dìbò tẹ̀ra ní kó wá lọ kọ wọnú omi irú eléyìí kó wá lọ dìbò ṣénú ẹ̀ máa dùn ṣó máa fẹ́ lọ kò ní lè lọ kán wá bá a ṣe kán jọ ń tọrọ Ọlọ́run à ń bẹ̀ wọ́n ni.
The community called on the state government to come to their aid ahead of the 2015 general elections to continue to ensure that the electorate are able to exercise their civic rights.
That is Ijagemo in Iba local government in Lagos. Now, when you go to most states and governors and political leaders want to flaunt their achievements, they show you the state capital. They show you the roads in the urban centers. But there are certain communities in the interlinks, in the interiors, who are suffering such menace, just like you've seen in that report. Now, that brings us to the question of the role of local governments in ensuring that infrastructures are established and well maintained. The previous national conference, the just concluded national conference, talked about autonomy for the local government. Do you think that will be the way out?
I do not think so. Under normal circumstances, if you have a local government council that is fairly independent, you want to believe that if he gets his act right, because we are told that it is the government that is closest to the people, and that is where it should be. The local government chairman is supposed to live in that environment and is supposed to traverse from one corner of that local government to the other. So you should know every bit of that area, entire area, and should be able to know where they should intervene, especially in the areas of road infrastructure and the rest. But I think that what has happened over the years, especially from the beginning of this democracy from 1999 to date, is that concerted and deliberate efforts have been made to undermine the local governments in this country. At the time, they were quite powerful. You know, I remember the Argonne as the umbrella of all local governments in this country was quite a powerful organization. But they have tried to wither down the influence and the powers of local governments, and that is the governors of these states. What they have done is that they have controlled the revenues that go to the local government councils. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if about 500 million has been allocated to the local government, the governor might just give the local government chairman just enough for what he has, you know, for salaries and so on. In most cases, he keeps the rest. Of course, they also steal the money, even at the local government council level and the rest. You know, so it is essentially, even if you give them independence, for as long as the people cannot hold them accountable, they will do whatever they want to do and nobody will ask them questions. And that has been the problem. And that has been the bane of governance in this country. That the people themselves do not realize that this governance you're talking about, this politics you're talking about, this election you're talking about, is about the people. Because without the people, there will be no election. Without the people, there will be no vote. You understand? But I think that, you see, they have, and I think it's also a deliberate policy, keep the people poor, keep them illiterate, so that they will not ask questions. And I think the motto or the logo of the West African pilot then in those days said, you know, show the people the light, and the people will find their way. It is not in the interest of the politicians to show the people light. Because once they show them that light, they will ask questions. Why are we living the way we are living? Why are we suffering? Why are you making 5 billion naira every month in the state and we're not seeing any development in our community? You know, and so that the issue of poverty and then illiteracy, you know, have been instruments that the ruling political elites have used against the people of this country. But it doesn't matter whether it's at the local government level.
What exactly is wrong with the people? Because 2015 is just around the corner. I mean, these people are the ones who live in the community where there's no light, where the roads are bad. What happens after all? Why is it impossible for the people to use that electoral tool as an opportunity to change leadership? Too many things have changed
in this country. I think it was Jean Bertrand that said something about impunity. He said that when impunity becomes a dominant force in the society, that in the course of time, you know, they adopt for themselves a legal code that authorizes impunity and a moral code that approves of it. What do I mean? Look at, for instance, the issue of a security vote that goes to the governor of a state. That is money that is not accounted for. So it's a legitimate or legalized way of stealing. You have told the governor, this is your money, 500 million every month. You don't have to account for it. Nobody asks you. But beyond that, apart from the money they take from the security vote, they are also stealing money, you know, public money and the rest. And what do the people do? That's why I said the legal code is one. They set up the EFCC. The EFCC does nothing. But they use it also as an instrument to hide corruption. They go to court, play around the courts for 3, 4, 5 years. Another government comes in. The matter, nobody goes to jail. As for the people themselves, remember what happened when J.C. Bori was being paraded before Nigerian courts? There were women who were going half naked in protest at the incarceration of J.C. Bori, whose action in government has also led to the to undermining these people economically. So the people themselves sometimes look at their oppressors and they are beholden on their oppressors. They look at their oppressors as their saviors. You understand? And that is the irony. That is the bitter truth about the country that we're in. But like I said, what they have done, they have succeeded in doing is to keep the people poor. Keep them poor. Keep them occupied with the desire to enhance their living condition and so on. Let them be motivated by that need to eat, to feed themselves and so on. Then they will never be in a position to ask the kind of questions that will threaten our existence as a political class in this country. And I think that is, you know, what, you know, has happened. You ask what has happened to our people. The reality is that, you know, when they have stolen from our people, they go to them during the election time, give them a fraction of the money they have stolen from them. And the people say they are good people, they are benevolent, they are wonderful people, they are people with good hearts. While they are the ones that have contributed to your destruction as a person and the destruction of your family and so on. So people are not able to make that connection. And for as long as we keep on having that kind of situation, you know, the country will continue along the path it has been going.
There are also talks as regards access to leadership. You vote for someone who becomes a local government chairman, you know, a governor, a senator. But then you just notice that even their mobile lines become inaccessible to the ordinary people. Is it a norm? Is it a political norm, or is there something that can be done?
It is the norm in this country, but it is not in a democratic setting with the ideals and the ethos of democracy. It is not the norm, because the leadership must at all times be accessible to their people, knowing that when the time is ripe, when the time comes, that their people are going to judge them harshly, and they are going to throw them out of power. But I think what has happened over time is that there is a realization by the ruling political elites that they can actually always manipulate the process of getting into power and remaining in power. And for as long as they can manipulate it, they are therefore not beholden on the people. The people are therefore not as important as they should be in a proper democratic setting. And I think that this is the reason why they behave the way they behave, because they feel that truly, ultimately, at the end of the day, the people themselves cannot determine their fate. You understand? But like I said, in a proper democratic setting, it is the people that are the ultimate deciders of whether a government remains in power or not. Look at, for instance, the American war, invasion of Iraq. The people protested about it, the Americans and the American people and the rest. In France, there were protests and the rest. But these governments went ahead to do whatever they wanted to do. And the people waited for them at the elections. And when the elections came, virtually all over Europe, the major capitals of Europe, they threw out their political leadership. George Bush, you know, his party lost out, you know, because of that. Tony Blair, you know, lost out in Britain. In Italy, Berlusconi then also, you know, lost out. Same thing in Australia and the rest. All those governments, all those countries whose governments had participated actively in the war, the people remembered. You understand? So that is the connection. And so what it means is that at any particular point in time, the political leadership in those areas, those countries, are conscious of the fact that the people will have the final say. And once the people are going to have the final say, the motivation, the push to want to do the work of the people is much, much higher than in a country where the politician believes that the people can be manipulated and the people will not be instrumental or key to their coming back or remaining to their, you know, to their coming back as governors or presidents or, you know, elected political office holders. I
understand we're having challenges with the phone line. That's another infrastructure damage, of course, challenge that is being faced by many Nigerians as we speak. Well, we'd love to hear from you. If you're lucky to get through, just endeavor to turn down the volume of your TV set while you do so. Ahead 2015 general elections, what should be the yardsticks for picking a leader? Because in Nigeria, we've seen the bad roads, we've seen the poor infrastructure. It's no longer about promises, because politicians come and say, oh, the road is bad. The opposition will come and say, this incumbent governor had not done well to this community. The same cycle goes over and over again. Promises, but then you give them the power. Nobody seems to fulfill that promise. What should be the yardstick for electing a true leader?
Well, first of all, we have a system that is inherently flawed, you know, and so you talk about, that's why I say, if you talk about sectoral breakdown in the country, across all sectors, you realize that for as long as you have the decadent political system and economic system on ground, you cannot really do much, you know, because everything in the system is geared towards, you know, maintenance of a status quo, whose primary duty is to themselves, whose obligation is to themselves, and so on, you know, and through corruption and graft and other acts of misgovernance, they keep the country down and the people down permanently. So I believe that there has to be a change in the system, but that in itself becomes a tall order. What kind of a change? Any change that has to come must be a revolutionary change. You know, it must be a radical change. It must be a transformative change. It must be a change that does away completely with the old order and brings about a completely new order. And so as we are transiting from one civilian government to the other, you realize that there is not much change because they are all going to operate under the same system. And so you find out that we are between the devil and the deep blue sea. We really cannot find, any solution. There are different ways, different methods of changing governments all over the world. And we have seen that happen. There's only one that is more acceptable than the rest. Changing governments through military coup is no longer in vogue, it's no longer fashionable. That the issue of people uprising is one way of changing, government, bad government. But the reality is that that's where I'm going now. I'm going to the downside. That's one other way. And you see, if it's people power, it is legitimate. Once the people arise as a body, as a group, and they say we want to effect a change, it can be legitimate. But the reality is that if we have seen what has happened in Egypt and other parts of the world, and so where you had that kind of thing, if you're not careful, it could be taken over by other elements that are interested in preserving the old order.
But do you think that the Nigerian people are ready for a change as regards to their value system? Because many will tell you that the kind of leadership we have today is just a perfect reflection of the quality of values that we have in the families.
No, I agree. I agree. There's no doubt about that, because people would also argue that after all, these leaders are from the people. They are from among the people and so on. And that if you put anybody there, it's going to do exactly the same thing and so on. But you see, I also know that in every 12, there's one that is always different. Okay. You understand? And so if people are saying, yes, that everybody, when you get to government, you will do this, believe me, somewhere along the line, there are people who, when they get into government, will do what is necessary in terms of showing the moral courage and the political will to get things done, even if it is to the detriment, at the detriment of their own existence, of their own lives and so on. There are still people out there. We need leadership that is honest, leadership that is knowledgeable, leadership that is bold, leadership that is forthright, leadership that is disciplined, leadership that is patriotic and committed and so on. And once you have that, you realize that you can actually tackle some of the problems that we have in this country, especially arising from corruption and so on. But you must also make sure that you are also above board. That is the only way you can actually, do something. With regards to the people, like I said, the greater burden of responsibility or duty lies with the political, class. They are the ones that have been given so much. And they say to whom much is given, much is expected. Now, the ordinary person on the street, the ordinary Nigerian, has to contend with, basic prices of foodstuffs. He has to contend with providing his own personal security. He has to contend with using his resources to generate his own electricity and so many other things he contends with. Now, the man who has been elected into government is giving all of these things free. And the reason why he might not even know the price of fuel in the market, or at the filling station, or other things that are going on around him, is that the people want to isolate him, want to alienate him from the daily problems of life, so that he can sit down and think and be able to do the work of the people. You understand? So all of the privileges that they enjoy, that the political leaders enjoy in this country, is so that their lives could be made easier so that they can do the work of the people. You understand? But in this case, they are not, doing it. So there is much more that I believe that the people need to do. The people have to be aware politically, first of all. They have to know that they are in bondage, and they have to know that that bondage can be removed, not by the people who have put them into bondage in the first place, but by themselves. It is only when they come to this realization, more or less, that they now know that they have a responsibility, they have a duty to provide a better country for themselves.
Some have also suggested that possibly if the remuneration for political offices are drastically reduced, that political leaders might sit up and will have genuine leadership coming up from the crowd.
There are different sides of the coin. I remember talking to somebody when I discovered that the person was with I think was it the Revenue and Mobilization and Fiscal Commission, that is the institution that is responsible for fixing salaries and allowances and so on of political office holders. So I expressed my annoyance to the man, because I think by that time they had just increased astronomically the monies or remuneration of public office holders. And I was upset. And he said, look, that the reason they did this is to discourage them from stealing. Now, that could make sense. But the reality is that when greed sets in, then there is no limit to the amount of money that you steal. So that cannot be an argument at all. In a country that is suffering severe economic deprivations, you want to be sure that whatever whatever public officers are earning is reflective of the general situation of the economy. Do you understand? In this case, it is different. Now you talk about cutting drastically these allowances, these remunerations, and so on. There are also implications. When you cut down, they might also, I say, it's a function of greed and their commitment to the country. When you cut down drastically and they're not getting much from them, they could also look for other ways to make this money. Through, for instance, for a lawmaker, through oversight functions and so on, because we are told from what we found out that it appears that some of these legislators, point a gun or point guns at these people or these ministries or parastatals whenever they go to do the oversight functions. In fact, I was told about one of that is at the federal level, some people at the National Assembly had come to one of these parastatals in the state, and they had drawn up an itinerary of where and where they will visit to show them what they have done all this while. So the man, one of the people in the delegation asked the man what they were going to do with this. So the itinerary where you go, he said, did you tell you that that's what we came for? Don't you know what to do? So they understood that it has to be gratification. So they went and brought money, cash. And the man said, what is this? It's in foreign currency. So they had to arrange it in foreign currency. They now told them, that parastatal, to write a report on their own visit, on the visit of the members of the National Assembly, to write a report, and that they themselves will append their signature to this report. So these are some of the things we are talking about. You see, the reality is that if you also do not build institutions, you talk of anti-corruption agencies and the rest that are not working because they are still being dictated to by the politicians. If you have a proper institution that works, most of these people will be in jail at this particular point in time. And perhaps, other people will be discouraged to also go the way that they have gone. You understand? Because it is said that when a crime goes unpunished, the heart of the people is filled with thoughts of rebellion, of evil. So these are some of the problems that one has to contend with.
So, right, Atike Jude, thank you very much for finding time to join us today on Cool Digest. It's good to always have you. Elections are certain in 2015. More certain, however, are the conditions of the people, the poor state of our infrastructures. We showed you bad roads in a particular community in Ogun State and the other in Lagos. Now, the involvement of these people in the electoral process is one of the questions that many are asking. How politically active are you as a Nigerian? And what are you also doing in restoring the value system that has been lost in this their country, Nigeria? This nation belongs to you and I, and you and I are the midwives that will give birth to the new generation of people and the new generation of values that will change us for better. I am Nithabi Oguntoye. Cold Digest continues tomorrow. Join us again.
Nigerians continue to
the city of Lagos.
There is still a one level of
Be the first to know from the north, south, east, west, and around Africa. We break the news.
one Nigeria.
Now you can catch all the actions live as the news breaks. We are Core TV News.
Welcome to Core TV,
a 24-hour news station.